There's one more thing I have to do before we get into the baking, and it involves popsicle sticks. Okay, we're going to be baking a lot of bread, and as I was going through the process of baking, I realized I was talking a lot about every single step, and I don't want to have to explain every single step, every single video. So what I'm going to do here is give you guys the bird's eye view, the overview of every single thing I'm going to do along the way in the process of making sourdough. So from start to finish, a loaf of sourdough bread takes about 24 hours. But during that time, you're only actually doing things for about an hour, hour and a half. A lot of that time is waiting. So I pulled out the popsicle sticks to try and explain to you guys what we're going to be doing on all the rest of the videos. Can we get an overhead shot here? There are 9 basic steps to baking a loaf of sourdough bread. This represents a 24-hour period that I take to bake a loaf of bread. Down here we have the time, starting at 5 p.m., midnight, 8 a.m., noon, and 4 or 5 o'clock the next day. The sticks represent about 30-minute periods. The yellow sticks are things that you have to do to the dough. The green sticks are resting times. The blue sticks are times overnight in the fridge. The purple sticks are proofing time. And the red is for baking. I usually start step 1 in the evening, the day before I want to bake the bread. So roughly 5 o'clock, I will prime my starter. Take a little bit of starter out of the container, put it into a bowl with flour and water, and let it rise for about 2 hours. Once the starter's primed, it's time to weigh and mix the ingredients in the recipe. You're going to mix your flour, your water, and your starter into a bowl, into a loose mass, and just smear it together into a big pile. We aren't adding salt at this time. Then we move on to step 3, which is AUTOLYSE. During AUTOLYSE, you walk away from the bowl and let it sit for about an hour. During AUTOLYSE, the flour will become hydrated and the gluten will begin to form. You don't have to do anything during AUTOLYSE, just leave the bowl on the counter and walk away. After the hour, step 4 is folding the dough. Just add the salt into the dough and begin the folding process. We aren't going to be kneading or mixing with a mixer or anything like that during this process. This is all done by hand. Fold the dough into itself 5, 6, 7 times. And then walk away and let it rest. Come back about half an hour later and fold it again. Let it rest and fold it a 3rd time. After the dough has come together and it's got a relatively smooth surface and you can ball the dough up in the bottom of a bowl, I'm going to cover up that bowl with plastic and get into bulk fermentation, which is putting the dough into the fridge for the night. During bulk fermentation, the dough is going to develop a lot of flavor and I'm going to sleep. When I wake up, I'm going to remove the dough from the fridge and let it rest on the counter to come to room temperature. Step 6, I'm going to turn the dough out onto the counter, divide it into loaf-sized piles, and then I'm going to fold those piles, and I'm going to do what's called pre-shaping those piles of dough into a rough ball shape. The dough is folded over on itself, turned 90 degrees, and then folded again, curled into a ball and left on the counter to rest. After about 30 more minutes, I'm going to come back, and step 7 is the final shaping. This is when you can turn your dough into boules or batards or baguettes or whatever shape you'd like. If you're doing a boule, you're going to put your dough into a floured Banneton for its 2nd rise, or what's called proofing. In step 8, I put the dough in plastic bags at room temperature and let it rise for roughly 2 to 2.5 hours. At the end of this period, I preheat the oven to 500 degrees and get ready for step 9. Once the dough has risen to roughly 2 times the size of when I put it in the Banneton, I'm going to turn it out into a preheated pot or onto a peel, and I'm going to slash the top of the dough. The slashes allow the inner crumb of the dough to expand outside in a predetermined spot, so it doesn't just explode out the side. After the dough is slashed, I'm going to put it into the oven at about 500 degrees Fahrenheit, 260 Celsius, for about the first 30 minutes. If the dough is in a pot, I'm going to remove the lid after the first half hour and lower the temperature to 450 Fahrenheit or about 230 Celsius for the second half hour. Then I'm going to start watching the bread. After it's reached the desired color, either a golden brown or a deep caramel color, I'm going to remove it from the oven and let it rest for a full hour on the counter to cool. After the bread has cooled for a good hour, it's okay to slice it open and enjoy. So this is generally the timeline I follow for my bread. It's actually possible to extend this time even further if you want to leave it in the fridge for a longer period here. Once it's in the fridge, it's not going to expand all that much. It's going to just stay in there and develop flavor. I've heard of people leaving the dough in the fridge for up to 24 hours. I've never done that, but I think 8 to 12 hours would be completely suitable depending on your time you want to bake. It's also possible to reduce your bulk fermentation to about an hour and then add the proofing time in the Bannetons in the fridge and make this last 8 to 12 hours. So if you wanted to spread this out a little differently, you could remove all this bulk fermentation time in the fridge, have bulk fermentation last about an hour on the countertop. That would bring all of this closer together. You would have your bulk fermentation happen on the counter. Divide, pre-shape, rest your dough, do your final shaping, put it into Bannetons, and your proofing stage could go into the fridge, which would then extend this stage, take it out of the fridge, let it rest, come to room temperature, and then move this here. So you could remove some time from your timeline and say, do something more like this. So this would start your process earlier in the day, say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, bring you up to midnight when you proof overnight in the baskets, in your Bannetons. And then you wake up in the morning, let them come to room temperature, wake up and bake. And then you're baking at 8 or 9 a.m. the next morning. So that's the 24-hour timeline I use to make sourdough bread. As you can see, you can stretch it, you can reduce it, you can modify it a little bit here and there, but those are all the steps you need to get through to make the bread. So feel free to come back and use this as a reference because I'm going to be doing all these steps in all of the videos. And you can see how I tweak things here and there, but all the steps are in there. All right, so I hope that helped explain what's going on here. Now, let's get into baking some bread. Thanks for watching.